freely now with our keynote speaker, Mr. Jonah Cooley. I'm gonna let him tell about himself, because he didn't give me anything to read. But he's gonna be our president one day of the United States. I always told him. Okay, I'd like to introduce to you all Mr. Jonah Cooley. Good hand.
Thank you, Ms. Brenda. All right. So for those of you who are unaware, this is actually my third time speaking before the Abbeville County Democratic Party. So I kind of wanted to give you a little bit of background on today's speech. The first time I spoke to this party was in July, mid-July, where I was in a little bit of a difficult position. Our president had just debated Donald Trump, and let's just say he underperformed in that debate. So it seemed like the consensus from every Democrat across America was for the president to step down. So I was in the difficult position of essentially giving a speech on why you should still vote for Joe Biden even if you really don't want to. This is the speech that I wanted to give instead. So I have a couple of favors to ask you. The first one is, I know you're all South Carolina Democrats. So I know you're fired up. I know you're ready to go. My first favor is, don't be afraid to show it. If you want to cheer, please cheer. If you want to clap, please clap. If you want to heckle at me, go ahead. Just don't be mad if I yell back. The second favor I have to ask is a little bit harder. I know this is a Democratic Party convention, but I'm not going to be speaking to you today simply as a Democrat. I'm going to be speaking to you today as a fellow citizen of this country, a concerned citizen, a young citizen, a citizen whose generation must reckon with challenges that no generation has ever faced. I ask, because of these issues, that you do not listen to me as a Democrat, but instead you listen to me as fellow citizens of this country and fellow members of the human race. With that in mind, my name is Jonah Cooley. I am a student at Lander University, where I double major in political science and sociology, and I have lived in South Carolina for my entire life. I grew up in a typical Southern Baptist household. The main national news channel in the house was normally Fox, and there's probably a picture or two out there of a 12-year-old Jonah wearing a Donald Trump t-shirt. Then something happened. In the lead up to the 2020 election, I started hearing about a senator from Vermont who was running to be the next president of the United States. At the time, his speeches seemed like magic. Unlike Donald Trump, who only identified social problems, Bernie Sanders spent his rallies pointing to actual solutions that helped working people, like Medicare for all and paid family medical leave. All of a sudden, government wasn't just this pesky tool of the elites preventing businesses from fixing the problems. Instead, government was a system built by the people to protect themselves. At the same time, the murder of young black Americans like Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd opened my eyes to the fact that racism wasn't a relic of the past, but was a practical reality that millions of Americans face every day. If I sound naive, I probably was, but I was 14. When it came to the Bible on my shelf, I watched in horror as the President of the United States used tear gas on peaceful demonstrators so that he could hold one upside down in front of a church. Well, I invite the President to take that Bible out of the box really quickly, because using the name of the Lord your God in vain also refers to using his name for your own glory. I invite him to keep reading that Bible. It says, do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. It says that whatever you've done to the least of these, you have done them unto me. It says that there is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female, but all are one.
Amen.
To continue on in the present day, our party just got humiliated in November. There is really no other way to put it. For the past 5 months, everybody in America has given their opinion on what went wrong. Everybody has been Monday morning quarterbacking about Gaza, trans issues, inflation, the border, and some people have pointed to a wave of elections across the world last year where incumbent parties underperformed, everywhere from the UK to India. In reality, all of these are partly to blame, but I believe that there is a path forward, both for our party and for our country. For many years now, many of you have likely felt it. An oligarchy has taken shape in this country. A group of robber barons are now in control of American society. Corporate consolidation is dominating entire industries. People in our party are starting to realize it, but I don't know that our party is entirely exempt from the control of the robber barons. Our party's not exempt because the Supreme Court has ruled that money from wealthy billionaires and large corporations is the same thing as protected free speech. In a sense, the Supreme Court has legalized buying out politicians, and Wall Street obviously wasted no time. There was once a time when the Democratic Party, the party of the working class, would have stood strongly against these anti-democratic practices. I remember back to Franklin Roosevelt, a president who reminded us that government by organized money is just as dangerous as government by organized mob. I remember back to Lyndon Johnson, who asked us to work not only toward the rich society and the powerful society, but upward to the great society. I even remember back not too long ago to Barack Obama, who asked us to believe in hope and change, not to be satisfied with the status quo. The position of the American government now seems to be asking working people to live within their means, even as their means are steadily shrinking. At the same time, the wealth controlled by the robber barons is steadily increasing. Our president often refers to this second administration as the golden age of America. I don't know if you've heard him say it or not. He only said it once or twice or 1,000 times. What it reminds me of is the Gilded Age, which was another time of blatant corruption and wealth inequality. At the time, John Rockefeller was the leader of Standard Oil. Most economists and historians refer to him as being the wealthiest American in history because at the height of his wealth, he controlled 1.5% of the American GDP. As of December 2024, Elon Musk controls 1.6%. All of that wealth was built on the backs of workers who make a fraction of what he does. That's the game the robber barons play. And now they're coming for more. They're coming for your Social Security, your Medicare, your Medicaid, your food stamps. They don't want a government of the people, by the people, for the people. They want a government of the money, by the money, for the money. And they won't be satisfied until they get it. That's why they're shutting down the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the anti-scam police, who were started after the 2008 recession to prevent working people from being cheated by banks. That's why they're firing federal workers, including thousands of veterans who are merely administering laws that protect working people. And they're not doing this in a way that the Constitution allows. They never watched Schoolhouse Rock as a kid. They're turning the government of this country into an appendage for the affairs of the wealthy. The effects of these rapid shifts have been evident and they have been unpopular, which probably leads us all to wonder why the American people are so upset to be getting exactly what they voted for again and again and again. The problem is that for a couple of decades now, Americans have been fed this bumper sticker idea that shrinking the size and scope of the federal government will just reduce their taxes and make for less red tape to cut through. They've been given this idea that the entire American Revolution was because the taxes were just too high. But I've read and I've studied the Declaration of Independence many times. This is where the political science comes into effect. I can tell you there's an entire section called the 27 Grievances, where the colonists list their many issues with the king. Throughout all 27 grievances, taxation is only listed once. And it's clear that the issue is not merely taxation, but instead a lack of political power. In our modern age, the problem is that in a very practical sense, shrinking the size and scope of the federal government means there are things the government is doing now that it's not going to be able to do anymore. So what that means is fewer air traffic controllers to make sure the planes don't fall out of the sky. Fewer inspectors checking the drinking water for cancer-causing forever chemicals. Fewer offices for the Veterans Affairs and Social Security, and eventually, yes, cuts to Medicaid, Medicare, SNAP, Head Start, Social Security, and so much more. You'll notice it never means that we're going to cut multi-billion-dollar contracts with billionaires like Elon Musk. And by the way, I'd like to say a quick word about some of these so-called entitlement programs. 85% of taxpayers, when polled, said that they would be willing to pay higher taxes in order to make sure that we continue to fund Social Security. Because without it, 2/3 of American seniors would fall below the poverty line. The first Medicare card that was ever issued was issued to former President Harry Truman, who had lobbied the federal government for years to create a health care program for seniors, because without it, even a former president could not afford adequate health care. Medicaid, being a government program, is actually more economically efficient than private health insurance. On the topic of the Affordable Care Act, which has been the object of the Republicans' affection for almost my entire life, I'm really not old enough to remember a time before ACA, but many of you in this room are. So I'd like you to go back with me and imagine that time when people were being denied medical coverage because of pre-existing conditions, because they were diabetic, because they were asthmatic, because they were cancer survivors. In the United States of America, the land of possibilities, working people still go into debt every time they go to the emergency room. Think about what it would be like if we removed the few protections that we already have. How bad of a position the working class would be in. Here's the deal. A lot of people hear about an IRS office closing somewhere, and it's almost like they think that it's going to make their taxes go down. But in reality, all that that's going to do is make it harder for you to get your situation fixed. It's the same thing when they shut down Social Security offices or VA office. Think about that for a second. Veterans Affairs offices being shut down. Without a strong VA, we would have people who fought bravely for this country sleeping on the streets or dead because they didn't have the support they need. Following the Second World War, the Allies could have gone on an aggressive campaign against Nazi war criminals. Instead, they decided to test the ideas of liberal democracy that they had just spent so long fighting for. They decided that as a final test of their ideals, that even the architects of World War II and the Holocaust were entitled to a fair trial and due process. In his opening remarks at the resulting Nuremberg trials, Robert Jackson, a U.S. Supreme Court justice and the chief prosecutor on behalf of the United States, declared the trials to be one of the most significant tributes that power ever paid to reason. In his final dissent on the U.S. Supreme Court, one of my heroes, Thurgood Marshall, perhaps recalling the earlier sentiments of Justice Jackson, wrote that power, not reason, is the new currency of this court's decision-making. In the same way, the entire political system is facing what political scientists call negative partisanship, where parties act in ways that aren't necessarily good for the people, but where opinions are formed instead entirely based off of what their opponents dislike. In other words, power, not reason, is the new currency of American politics. The collateral damage in this modern civil war is the entire Bill of Rights, which is used as a political pawn of the minority party, but is completely ignored once that party regains power. A week ago, many of you may have heard about this, Immigration and Customs Enforcement detained a man named Mahmoud Khalil, a permanent legal resident in the United States, a graduate of Columbia University, and a husband to an American citizen. They're detaining him for his participation in the protests last year on the campus of Columbia, where you may recall that students were protesting Israel's bombing of civilians in Gaza. Whatever your feelings are on the conflict, what Khalil did is protected by the First Amendment. More than that, he's being detained without any criminal charges, directly in violation of something called habeas corpus, which is a right dating back to 12th century England that simply states that the government cannot hold you without cause. To reiterate, he was a permanent legal resident who is married to an American citizen. And if you don't think they'll start going after citizens next, you've forgotten 2020, when they deployed the military against peaceful BLM protesters in Lafayette Plaza, who were almost entirely American citizens. The institutions that would have been ready to help working people in previous periods have now been consumed by the robber barons. The Washington Post was once famous for the muckraking reporting of journalists like Bob Woodward during the Pentagon Papers and Watergate, but it's now owned by the second richest man in the world, Jeff Bezos, who told their opinion department that they are not to publish any stories that don't align with his politics. Even the Democratic National Committee has on occasion put their thumb on the scales of primaries and prevented authentic populist movements from forming. As a result, even the populism in this country serves the very wealthy. It shouldn't be this way, and it doesn't have to be this way. One of my favorite authors is a historian named John Meacham, who once said that the greatest moments in American history have always been when we more generously apply what Jefferson meant when he said that all men are created equal. In the same vein, Lyndon Johnson once said that it's all Americans who must overcome the crippling legacy of bigotry and injustice, and we shall overcome. You have heard it said that the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. That is true, but I tell you today that the arc does not bend itself. It's up to the efforts and wills of the people to bend the arc in the right direction. Likewise, you've heard it said that upward mobility is the American dream. I tell you today that for many millions of Americans, that dream has never been a reality. Take healthcare. Why is it that we are the only developed country on earth that doesn't guarantee healthcare as a human right? You've heard over and over again about the expenses of this complex beast. But did you know that Medicare for All would actually save $450 billion a year? And I would argue, more importantly than that, it would save 68,000 lives a year.
Right.
Working families making around $60,000 a year would pay up to 14% less on annual health care costs. Paid family medical leave is another right guaranteed by almost every developed country on earth except for the wealthiest. Paid family medical leave would improve public health and it would reduce the stress on workers. The reason that Donald Trump is so popular is because, unlike our party, he is willing to call out a lot of the issues the working class of this country faces. The problem is that Donald Trump wants the wealthy to keep negotiating all of the deals. In the end, his solutions just create even more problems for working people. For the first time in American history, young people today have a worse economic position than their parents or their grandparents did at the very same age. The New Deal and Great Society programs that were once in place have been gutted, yes, by Republicans like Ronald Reagan, but also by Democrats like Bill Clinton, who were economically trying to out-Republican the Republicans. Our party has abandoned the social safety net and the Keynesian economic model that was once championed by FDR and LBJ, and instead adopted a watered-down version of the trickle-down model. Today, Democratic leadership continues to capitulate to the Republicans. Even yesterday, when we all witnessed the Senate Democrats cede ground to a reckless continuing resolution that offers the president a blank check from the party of fiscal responsibility and helps him override Congress's power of the purse. Since the party keeps ceding ground to Republicans, I'll quote George H.W. Bush by saying that this voodoo economics just isn't going to work. So I know about this time it's starting to sound like I'm leaving the Democratic Party. On the contrary, you're not going to be able to get rid of me. I have to stick around at least another couple years. I've got a campaign for Andy Bashir in a couple years. I just look at the party and the country, and I think that it can and should do better. I look at the party and think that we need to stand up to the robber barons, that we need to stand up to Trump, but we still need to stand up and clap for a little boy with cancer at the State of the Union. I think that we need to recognize that Donald Trump is not the problem. He's a symptom of a larger issue, and that is what we are working against. I'm not leaving the party. I'm not happy with the country right now either, but I'm not leaving it. 2 reasons. Passports cost too much, and this is my country too. And in the same way, this is our party too, and we've all given it way too much money to leave it now. I'm coming to you today to tell you that I have seen a better path forward for the Democratic Party and for our country. I'll close with this. You've all heard throughout your lives of an America where all men are created equal, where anything is possible, where anyone can succeed with liberty and with justice for all. I have to tell you, that may be the American dream, but that has never been the American reality. We don't live in that country, and we never have. Maybe we never will. But the point of politics has never been accepting things for the way that they are. The point of politics has always been making the American dream a reality, making a better humanity, a better world, a world where they can all sit under their vine and fig tree and none will make them afraid. People don't seem to realize that anymore. I'm a young man, so I haven't seen a whole lot of the world yet. But I love to learn. I love to read, and I love to listen. So I've heard and I've read from plenty of people who have. All that anybody wants is the ability to look at themselves in the mirror every morning and know that everything is going to be okay. We haven't had that for a long time. Maybe we never did. Either way, the only way we can go is forward. Life is like driving a car. You can glance behind you for a second, but if you look too long, you're going to crash. You need to know where you're going. Our party and our country need to know where we are going. We need a vision for the future. And in closing, I'd like to tell you mine. I have seen a future where the workers of our country can organize, unionize, and negotiate for better wages and workplace conditions. I have seen a future where healthcare and education aren't luxuries, but where even the poorest among us can take them for granted. I have seen a future where the freedoms of every human being are protected under law. I have seen a future where the Constitution is king and the people are sovereign. Above all, I have seen a party and a country for the people. So now, my fellow Democrats, my fellow Americans, I ask you, are we still a party of the people? Yeah. Do we still believe in opportunity? Do we still believe in possibility? Do we still believe in freedom? Yes. Do we still believe in the future of America? And are we ready to keep moving forward? Yeah. Are we ready to overcome? For the sake of human progress, we must overcome. We must overcome bigotry. We must overcome injustice. We must overcome gun violence. We must overcome this climate crisis. We must overcome wealth inequality. We must overcome this age of oppression. So let us overcome. Let us overcome with our ballots. Let us overcome with our protests. Let us overcome with millions of voices calling out for change. Let the world know that the party of the working class is still alive. Yeah. Let the world know that these robber barons have met their match. And let the world know that America is going to keep moving forward. Thank you. God bless you. And may God bless the United States of America.
Y'all, he deserves a standing ovation.